Please be advised that in order to foster quality discussions in each episode, we will spoil the stories in each game and text we talk about. Good news is, 90% of the titles we cover are old enough that many of you might already know all about them. That said, we do encourage you to play and read before listening.
Listen up now, when we leave on, get ready for Arcade Bookshop. Read your book, and play a game, check it out. Don't be lame, listen up now, when we leave on, get ready for Arcade Bookshop.
He believed he was right in saying that the lower animals on Animal Farm did more work and received less food than any animals in the county. That was one of my favorite lines of the book, and it's like really simple, although most of the book is simple, but it's very simple, but that was one of the moments where I was like, it just felt immediately applicable to modern day. I mean, Caleb, you drive a beverage truck for a living. You work at coffee shops, Riley. What's the hierarchy in a job like that?
What's the hierarchy?
There's always a hierarchy, right?
Grunt level workforce. Usually there's either middle management or upper management of some sort. Depends how big the company. And then when you go beyond that, just it gets to disgusting wealth that we could never imagine or dream of.
People that have say and people that have no say.
Right. Like, at my job, I think we're all at the same level technically in different ways, like all of us. But at my job, I do all the work. I'm in that grunt category that you mentioned. And then you talk to management, you tell them what needs done. They ignore you. Eventually they steal your ideas and come back and tell you what needs done. And
Get paid a lot more to do it.
yeah, I was going to say, who makes more money? The people that don't listen to anything and just sit around having meetings all day.
Yep.
Who live in their farmhouse and ignore the farm. And it's sort of a shame to feel like an animal packed into a little ball and clipped onto management's waistband until the moments few and far between they actually ask for our opinions. Like I said, only to ignore them or steal our ideas and continue paying us the same shitty wage. Are we in agreement?
Yes.
I concur.
Welcome to Arcade Bookshop, where we talk about video games and their literary counterparts for all of you who love to play and to read. I'm Bryce Yoli. I'm here with my pal and cousin-in-law, Caleb James, and back with us again today is my oldest friend, Riley Moon. Today we're talking about Animal Farm by George Orwell. Animal Farm by George Orwell, after last week's episode about Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, and the Third Generation. So, this book's about a farm in which the animals rebel by attacking the human owners, running them out of their house and off the property. Throughout the book, the animals are righteous about themselves and about kicking them off the property, and forming anti-human rules, defending the property when the humans try to come back, and continuously modifying their animal legislature as time goes on and conflicts arise. I think that's a pretty good summary. Do you guys agree? Would you add anything?
Other than the allegory to communism and whatnot, but we'll be getting to that shortly, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm. And before we do, I'd like to bridge the game and book with the idea of Pokemon essentially living digitally in small spheres that trainers often store in their waistbands, like I mentioned a minute ago. And this book's about communism, like you said, which we know only works in theory and not in practice. And while Pokemon, the game or the cartoon, doesn't really display communism or talk about it in any way, I think someone adult who's consuming this always thinks about Pokemon at some point in some little way in the back of their mind as being forced to live in these little balls that usually are only being released to fight, to battle, or you rarely see them out just hanging out. You do, but there's always something weird about it. I mean, I always felt that way. Like I know it's an innocent thing, and there's like when we talk about it this way, we're really digging, but I think we've all thought that.
Yeah, it's definitely against their will. in some form.
I actually wrote down here, like, obviously who cares because it's a TV show and a video game, but there is like an element of abuse that crosses your mind when you think of how absurd it is. Like,
Has there ever been a Pokemon Revolution in any of the games or mangas?
I doubt. Well, I don't know. Like Spencer mentioned when we were on our plague episode.
Yeah, but it's just like there has to be some kind of retribution for all these, gym rats who are basically using these Pokemon as slave work labor.
Right.
I think it's terrible.
Well-
they're not just slave labor; they're fighting each other, which is infinitely worse.
I always loved the idea that even though there were Pokemon that were owned by people and fighting each other, there were still wild Pokemon out there just enjoying their lives in their natural habitats.
Right. That's a good point that we didn't really talk about before. There is a contrast there, and it's I always feel stupid because when you think about literature or things that people talk about to extract the metaphors and allegories, you talk about them because it's clear there's something there. And with Pokemon, there clearly isn't anything there, except on a subconscious level. And like we said in the last episode, it was hard to talk about that because we tried to do research and see what people said about Pokemon in terms of like from an analytical point of view, and there's just nothing. The story is just not there. I think even in the TV show. So it's silly to talk about it this way, but I think the way we have to approach it, which I think we've done already, is just that like subconscious instinctual reaction when you look at it as an adult. And
I like Riley's idea about the wild Pokemon and how you can have some kind of expanded Pokemon universe where, in the real world, you have cattle, but you also have wild bovine in some areas still. There are different species of cow that just not so much in most places, maybe like Australia and a little bit in the U.S., that like buffalo and stuff that actually still roam wild. But we've, pretty much conquered most species and tamed most species. And that's kind of what happened in the Pokemon universe. Most species have been tamed and now they're just used for labor or whatever else they want to use them for.
yeah, exactly. And then when you think about it with Animal Farm, it makes me think of the repeated issue of living in the confines of the farm, working dawn till dusk, and the food ends up being regulated and rationed unfairly. And you don't really hear about free animals elsewhere, except I don't think you do. Do you hear about other farms doing that? Animals rebelling at other farms?
You mean in the book?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
There's,
So
I think, maybe rumor that is mentioned about other animals looking at Animal Farm as an example, but I don't think it ever states that there's actually any kind of rebellion that follows.
yeah, and then the only other thing you see is which isn't really, I don't know. I was gonna say the only thing you really see is I think one of the horses leaves Animal Farm and goes to a different farm because she prefers to be, quote unquote, enslaved.
Oh, you mean the mare? I forget her name. The one that had the ribbons in her hair, and then they didn't want the ribbons because that was one of the 7 tenets of Animal Farm. One of them was you don't dress in clothes, and she liked to look pretty. She was a pretty show horse. Yeah, she ends up. Does she escape? I don't remember exactly how she gets out, but yeah, she ends up at another farm where she can wear her ribbon and be pretty much a slave, an animal, but she enjoys that life. And that's, I think, probably Orwell's view on certain people who don't only accept their place in such a universe, but also they kind of like it. They like being told what to do or being ordered, as long as they get their little creature comforts, which really hits close to home. Because so many problems today would be solved if people just would forego their creature comforts and say, no, fuck you. We're not going to take this shit anymore. Pay us more or we're not going to work for you. And nobody does that. Most people don't do that.
Right. What character do you think you resonated, either of you, what character do you think you resonated with the most?
I would like to say Benji, but I don't have the indifference he does. Not Benji, Benjamin, right? The mule.
Is that
donkey?
The donkey. Yeah.
That one pretty much, from my understanding, represents Orwell, or any person who can view such atrocities but doesn't do anything about it and just kind of stays quiet and knows, like an eternal pessimist that knows things are not going to get better, which was kind of the moral of the story is things are bad and they're always going to be bad. And sure enough, they just get worse and they're always bad.
What about you?
Remind me the name of the old horse, the workhorse.
Boxer?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the part where I was rereading it and thinking about the part where he never really questions anything. He's just like, I know I'm good at working. I'm just going to work. This is for some cause.
Napoleon is always right.
Yeah. And so, like, in some respects, I feel like that because I know that I'm not high level enough to think about the theoreticals behind why we do things in society. I just know I'm good at doing my job, and so sometimes I just like to put my head down, not think about it too much, do my job. It feels good to just get work done. But then at the other end of the spectrum, Snowball, there are some days where I just want to read and think about things and figure it out, and I'm just like, why is this way? We can do better. There's got to be a way out of this.
Snowball, the other pig?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he was the one in the beginning that it seemed like he had good intentions, at least.
Right. Yeah, I liked Boxer a lot too. Like, you always knew he wasn't quite right, but I think, like I said, and it's funny that I'm actually referring back to our episode, but like I said about Team Aquan and Team Magma, how neither of them were right, and eventually they had to just accept that. Because nobody can know for sure if they're right, and I think like Boxer just ended up working. Is he's like, well, what else is there? Where I mean, I was part of this rebellion. I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna assume my leader is correct, and just hang on and hope for the best. And because what else is there? And eventually, I'll die anyway.
Well, Boxer had the saddest story arc because, he's a representation of the Russian labor class of the time. And basically his whole philosophy was after the rebellion, okay, we're all a team. We work for the betterment of everyone. And I'm just going to believe the government, blindly. They got us here where we, rebelled and now we're free. So why should I not trust them? And then they don't only lead him astray, but he works harder than anyone, works double time when everyone's sleeping. He goes out and works. And the only hope he has for a better life is this glimmer of retirement that they're supposed to build him a little pasture for retirement when he's, I think, 12 years old. 12 comes and goes and he's still working and they put it off a little. Then he finally gets injured. And it's like, oh, we'll send you to the vet and you'll be okay. And then what happens? They send him away in the meat wagon and he's going to be turned into glue. And the only one, Benjamin, the mule, the donkey, the only one that actually understands and remembers everything because donkeys, I guess, live a long time. He, through the whole thing, doesn't have emotion, doesn't have opinion on anything. This is the one time he freaks out. He's like, no, read the fucking van. It's not a veterinarian. They're going to take him away and they're going to kill him. And he freaks out. And then the animals by this point are so beaten down. The only time they finally decide to respond and chase the van down is when it's too late and it's already leaving the farm. So it's just like really sad because it's like, oh, you work your whole life and you think you're going to at least get to enjoy your old age and you never do. And that's basically the moral of that. And that's Orwell in the 40s saying that. So like, what do we have to look forward to nowadays?
Yeah, I think it's crazy. Like this book and we're going to have a future episode of Arcade Bookshop about the plague by Albert Camus. It's also up on the DPW, the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. But we're gonna have it here, feature it here again later on. But we read these two books from the 40s, and you going into these books, you think, well, I'm gonna run into some antiquated ideas here, and what you actually run into are identical scenarios to what we're currently living, and it's completely
not good.
It's completely bizarre reading dystopian novels that completely match our present time. The one thing that blew my mind I mean, it didn't blow my mind, but it surprised me how to me it comes back to modern day. How they have the 7 commandments of Animal Farm, and they're clearly lined out. I'm going to pull them up real quick just so everyone knows what we're talking about.
And that was right after the first revolution, that whenever they first took over the farm.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, for those who haven't read Animal Farm, the rebellion actually starts with the oldest pig. His name's Old Major, and he is a representation of Karl Marx. So someone who, in theory, communism's a good idea, but in practice it never works because there's always some corrupt or greedy individuals who take it over. So Old Major's plan was for them to take over the farm so they wouldn't have to work so hard, because the farmer, Mr. Jones, he's just a giant piece of shit. He mistreats him. He doesn't feed him. I think he's a drunk. And he's basically a representation of corrupt government. So you have Old Major, who sets this rebellion into motion, but he dies right after he gives a big speech. And then Snowball, who, while he appears to be good in this book because he's not in it that long, he actually represents Trotsky. So basically just the lesser of two evils, because Napoleon is Stalin. Stalin's way worse. So, they actually go through with the rebellion, and Snowball is a hero of the rebellion. Everybody does their part, but Napoleon wants to take over. Without giving out the whole story, he gets Snowball pretty much banished from the farm because he's able to train these puppies. He gets these puppies and he trains them to only do his bidding. So, you got these, not rabid dogs, but, vicious dogs. They can pretty much kill most of the animals on the farm outside of Boxer, the giant horse. So Napoleon uses these dogs to intimidate and kill the other animals, and pretty much he just takes over. And without Snowball there, Napoleon's able, with his sidekick Squealer, who's pretty much like a representation of the propaganda machine, and a lot of this stuff can also go to modern day. So you think of US, UK, any country that has a propaganda machine, not just Soviet Union, Russia. But he utilized these dogs to enforce his will. And then when he takes over, he slowly changes the history. And then that's when we get into your tenets. He starts changing the tenets. And Snowball goes from a hero to, he actually didn't do that much during the rebellion, to eventually, no, he was the one who was on the farmer's side. And then, he just, these myth truths and these lies just get perpetrated to such a ridiculous degree that all the animals eventually believe it. And it's like, I see this happen all the time in modern US politics. It's disgusting. Like, things from a few years ago, people were like, no, it definitely happened this way, even though we have video proof.
Yeah, so and that's exactly what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say. Blows my mind. It's exactly what's happening. It's happening more and more and more and more. And because the way the commandments started out in the book are: 1, whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. 2, whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. 3, no animal shall wear clothes. 4, no animal shall sleep in a bed. 5, no animal shall drink alcohol. 6, no animal shall kill any other animal. And 7, all animals are equal. And over the course of the book, like Caleb said, they continue to change and change and change. They modify them to suit, the Napoleon and Squealer, they modify them to suit their needs or whatever Napoleon feels like he wants to do.
Some animals are more equal.
Yeah, and so like eventually they have to they change almost all of them, if not all of them. Like whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. They have to eventually change that because they start trading with the neighboring farms in order to keep Animal Farm going. No animal shall wear clothes. I don't know what it changed to, but I know Napoleon started wearing something. I think
he started wearing a hat.
Yeah, I was gonna say a hat. And they started wearing those like medals or ribbons or whatever.
Yeah.
After each like attack they had, because like the humans started attacking Animal Farm, trying to get it back. No animal shall sleep in a bed. They changed that because Napoleon started sleeping inside the farmhouse on the Mr. Jones, is that his name? The guy who
Yeah.
used to
Yeah,
started sleeping on his bed, and I think they changed it because he wasn't using sheets or something. And
And I don't know about you guys, but every time one of these changed, I just kept getting so mad.
Yeah.
'Cause this happens in real life. I
It
hate it
does.
so much.
it's like technicalities that are like written behind your back, and you don't even know it until it's done, and you can't prove it. And then eventually, by the end of the book, it gets distilled down to one statement which is all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Yeah, that's it. All right.
My favorite one was when they added an amendment where once the Napoleon realized that there was whiskey in the house, they drank it and he got really drunk. And then the squealer came out and announced that he was dying because he thought they never had a hangover before. But then when he got better, they changed it again from no animal shall drink or whatever to no animal shall drink to excess. So that they can still drink. It's stupid.
Yeah, I love that slippery slope of the entire revolution, going from everyone being so pumped, we got this, things are going better, we're going to work for a cause, to you just slowly see them getting more and more like, okay, like I see how this is going. And they're like, really? This is happening? And then it just divulges into this utter chaos of everyone knows exactly what's going on at the end, and they're just killing off those people one by one.
Oh yeah, they how does that come? Eventually, isn't it like they all eventually have they give the animals an opportunity to admit all the ways they've broken the laws.
Yep.
Right?
And the dogs.
And then they just each
Kill
one
'em.
they just slaughter them, and they break their no animal shall kill another animal rule.
Well, they changed that to without cause.
Yeah, it's horrible, and the whole book they end up starving the animals anyway, because it starts with Snowball, which it's funny because like in the beginning you do like Snowball, you feel like he's right, like he's doing the right thing, and the sad truth is that I don't think any government can just nothing ends up being ideal. Nothing ends up being the way you want it to be. So you can always start out a government thinking, well, I'm going to do everything the right way, but there's always challenges. Like with Animal Farm, they didn't want to do anything like humans did, but they realized that in order to maintain food and the farm, they needed to work like constantly. So Snowball was like, well, if we just got electricity, like that would help a little bit. We could automate some things, and we'd have to work a little bit less. So if we work extra hard for a little bit, we build this windmill, and we can get electricity going on the farm. Then we can all just indefinitely after that we can all relax. We'll only work 3 days a week, and everything will be good. Let's just work extra hard. And then the windmill falls apart. I don't know if someone attacks it or it just blows down. Then you have to rebuild it. And I don't even know how long. It takes years to rebuild the windmill. And it just ends up that throughout this whole period, they get less and less food, and they work more and more and more. And they ration it, and they give preference. The rations are unequal, and the majority of it goes to the pigs who are working the least.
Mm-hmm.
I forget how I started off that that point, but you guys can pick up from there.
That was the most insidious part of the whole story, was at the very end when the pigs have the humans over and they're playing cards. The animals can't even distinguish the humans from the pigs anymore, and the humans are sitting there telling the pigs, like, you've done such a great job. Not only are your animals working more than any of our animals ever do, but they're getting fed way less, and they don't even know that they have it bad. They think it's good because you've convinced this was good. Even because there's a underlying notion throughout the whole story where, well, things aren't as bad as it was when Mr. Jones was in charge, though, right? Even though we're working more, it's still not as bad. And the only one in the whole story who knew from Jump Street to the very end that this was all bad was Benjamin. And he remembers, like, no, Mr. Jones sucked ass, but this is way worse. But he's stubborn donkey. He doesn't care. He's like, whatever. this is how it goes. I'll die eventually.
And it's so frustrating because it's like the one person who knows the difference and who can clearly see what's going on, but he also knows he sees the futility in even saying anything, and it's just fucking depressing because that's real life.
Well, I wonder because I've heard it said that it represents Orwell to a degree, but I wonder if that character actually represents just the common man like us who just works for a living and just wants to do our own thing. And just, we just want to live. We don't want to be subjected to this crazy government, but we don't want to work ourselves to death either. Like, we just want to be able to just provide for our families, and have a semi-comfortable life. That's all we want. So if we could keep that going, we will let the other shit go on, and we won't fight, awful governments or whatever it is that's causing these problems, as long as we're not personally affected too much.
Yeah, I remember reading a thing about how they were saying that there was a whole toss-up between, does revolution have to be violent, and does revolution have to be from the top down? Do you have to overthrow the government to have a revolution? And there is the possibility that you can do revolution from the ground up versus top down. You can start things locally. You can change the way that people around you think. You can build things better and slowly, just over time, change the way things are and make it better. Does it have to be violent? I don't know. It seems like nowadays that's really the only way that you can get people's attention.
Well, what would happen, say, if everyone none of us are going to go to work, and we're not going to pay our bills, not going to pay our mortgages, not going to pay our property taxes? You can't arrest everyone. You can't make everyone homeless. You can't, what would they do? What would the government do? Even local and city governments, they couldn't do anything if everyone agreed to this. But that's the problem. Same with the story with the pigs. Someone always has to be on top and wants to get ahead and thinks they're more equal than everyone else. That's where the struggle always lies, and you can't overcome that because that is just man.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the whole thing, like how communism in theory works, but everyone has to agree with it all the time. It's just like when, I don't know how many people say this, but when we talk about student loans today, my wife at least is always like, "What if just everyone just stopped fucking paying them?
Can't get everybody."
Do? Yeah, exactly. Someone's always gonna be scared. You might get like 70% of the country by like rallying them together, but the 30% are gonna ruin it for us and make us all go to prison.
Such bullshit.
Well,
and the way that it's so hard to not have your inner human instinct for power tied to that rebellious state of mind where it's like, I want things to be better. I want everyone to be free. But if I was in charge, I could do whatever I wanted. And that's just inseparably tied together as a human instinct, I think.
Well, the one problem with somebody wanting to be in charge, when you're in charge, how often do you think the Hitlers of the world think they were doing wrong? Do you think that their vision in their mind was wrong? No, they think they're the good guy. Everybody thinks they're the good guy of their own story. So that's where the problem is when you have a Stalin who's taken over communist Russia and just made it terrible, but that's his view of how the world should work, and as warped as it is, to him, it's a good thing. So as long as you have people like that, it's never going to work out.
But it is crazy to think too. Animal Farm was such a small group of animals. You would think that they could all talk amongst each other. It was only believable because they were animals and they were dumb. If you only had 10 people, you'd be like, all right, we all see what's going on here, right? But animals it's believable that they can't figure out their way out of it.
Well, that was the brilliance of it.
Yeah, I was going to say at the same time, it's the brilliance of it is that they're all animals, but it's just like your group of friends.
I know. Yeah. You like to think that if you were with that, yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's why the whole thing is so fucking depressing, because it's so real. Because nobody's a hero.
The sheep are the most like common example we use
Yeah.
for people that don't think and just follow. So the sheep in this story, they can't do anything but follow. That's the only thing they can do. They can't
Exactly.
think for themselves. So you always have different classes of people and different education levels, and just even if you're really intelligent, if you just had the wrong hand in life and you're born at the bottom, you might not be able to overcome and become anything in your life other than like a day laborer or something. So, and if you're a day laborer like Boxer, you really can't think beyond what you're doing because that's all you know.
If I'm ever in a room with 20 people and this happens, I'm gonna be so upset.
Would you become the Napoleon?
I don't
I'm
know.
taking charge. You guys are too stupid.
Just so I could nuke the whole room, maybe. I don't
Honestly,
know.
that's what I do. When everyone gets quiet and dumb, I start taking over. That's always my instinct. I do that at work.
Yeah.
I always I usually start out like kind of the idiot, obviously, because I'm new. I don't really know what I'm doing, and at a new job, and then eventually it's like, how are all of you so fucking dumb? And if my team ever listens to this podcast, you're all really smart, but it's just everyone else. Like, you realize how small, at least in terms of their thought, just everyone is. And then eventually I'm just like, you guys aren't doing anything. Give me the position to be able to make this situation better than it is now, because it doesn't need to be this way. It's like there are options, and you're not choosing to see them.
Well, and see, it might be good then for a little bit after that time, but what happens after that?
I turn into a fascist piece of shit.
Dictator, yeah. Suddenly he has like this elitist bathroom in the office that no one's allowed to use. Gold-plated toilet. He's on the top floor.
That reminds me, when you go to the bathroom, I have to change the seat because it's mine.
Okay.
I'll give you the sheet, the flimsy one.
Oh, okay. I'll work harder.
So I was looking up what the characters represent in real life, and Caleb, you already talked about a lot of them. I was surprised, I guess, that one of the, which one is it? It's the other farm owners.
Oh yeah,
Mr.
Frederick was Hitler, and
Mr. Pilkington and Foxwood is supposed to be the allies, like the UK and the US, and Mr. Frederick of Pinchfield Farm is supposed to be Hitler. I didn't really get it. Like I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I was reading it and I was kind of looking for that stuff, and I just it didn't like hit really clearly to me that
I honestly didn't focus too much on the neighboring farms. I didn't think that was supposed to be a big metaphor or allegory for anything, so I didn't look into it. But other than the guy being like a piece of shit, I didn't see like why was he Hitler. And then the Allied Forces one, I didn't understand because they're just like chilling and doing their own thing, and they just kind of come and go whenever they're needed or asked to. I didn't really understand that one either. I don't know if that was a stretch or not. I didn't read a lot into like the allegory stuff.
I didn't read too far into it. I was just trying to get a feeling for the characters and what people think about them, and I didn't actually look into whether Orwell ever speaks to his own novel about like if this is correct, like if that's actually what he was talking about. But I'm curious because it's that thing where like people start talking about books in this way, and then everyone assumes it's the truth, just like how in like The Man in the Sea, everyone talks about how it's this big allegory, and Hemingway is like, no, it's just about a guy that is going out to sea to catch a fish.
Well, it's like we talked about that in the plague episode.
Yeah.
It's just like people see all this allegory in here, but that might not actually have been the author's intent, or maybe they used that just as a stylistic choice, but it wasn't something to look super deep into. Obviously, this is very allegorical, but
yeah,
I didn't like the one was the main one. I didn't really understand. Like the Whimper one, I thought was pretty good because the character, he does the bargaining and trading with the pigs, and basically he's just like the countries that came and did business with dictators. Like they didn't care about, they ignored the atrocities and how awful everything was. So Whymper ignored every horrible thing going on the farm because he could make some money. Like that was his only concern.
That actually, the way, I mean, you talking about it just now, it reminded me of Catch-22. I'd like to talk about that in a future episode. Did you read that, Riley?
I think I did, but it's not on the top of my head right now.
I read that like 5 or 6 months ago, and I love that book. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. I didn't really know what style of writing it was, and it's almost like Vonnegut.
Really?
Yeah, only a little more serious. But there's a character in it who he's part of this, God, I can't think of the word, this like squadron who's deployed or whatever. They're bombers. But he ends up being kind of like a quartermaster, but he like appoints himself that way, and he ends up taking planes and flying over to the countries where they do like their R&R and stuff. And over the course of the book, he establishes relationships with all the governments in all these neighboring like countries or regions, and he establishes this huge trade system. And there's a huge amount of absurdity to it, where he tells everyone that they're like a partner in his business, and like they're all gonna get theirs in the end. Like just like invest, don't worry, you'll get yours. Right. But in the end, he just ends up having to harm his own people. I don't want to spoil it, but it's that like complete ignorance thing. Like he's making a few bucks and promising it'll come back to everyone else, but really all that ends up coming back is death and ruin.
Yeah, well, I think that's so funny because that kind of ties back into the whole revolution thing, where I think that whenever the book starts, you feel like this is going to be a good thing. Everyone's super on board. Like, let's just cut all ties with the past, restart everything. We've got good intentions. Don't worry about it. And that was like the number one flaw, where they wanted to completely forget everything that happened before and just move forward. And it's like, no, like you can't get better if you don't remember the past. And by just going along with all this bullshit, they just get tied up in, oh wait, how was this before? Like, oh, I think it was worse, but I can't remember. And you're stuck up in the motions of how are things going, and it just falls apart so fast, and they're just left to deal with it.
Right, and over time, because animals don't generally live that long. I mean, you kind of said this already about Benjamin, because donkeys for some reason live a long time, I guess. Over a short amount of time, there's all new animals that don't know any different. And that's what everyone hopes for. That's what governments hope for. People don't even remember what things used to be like.
I mean, that's
why history is important.
It's so funny now, though, too, because nobody wants to have kids anymore. No one's passing down information from generation to generation. Everyone's just kind of on their own, and so every generation is just a free for all. It's like if you know about bad stuff that happened before, you have a leg up. But if you're new to the game, you're just gonna do the same stupid shit that everyone else is doing.
And then you can also talk about how a lot of people don't even believe in history anymore, and with good reason.
And things just move so fast, it feels irrelevant. But
yeah, and like history is changing. A lot of it we know isn't like completely true, at least.
Yeah, you have to fight for finding the truth a lot of times, so it's hard.
Yeah, like even stuff we were brought up in like learning through school.
Propaganda.
Lot of it, yeah, it's just a lot of it's just bullshit to promote like our own subtle kind of nationalism. Like I mean, we call it patriotism, but ultimately at least there's a degree of it being unhealthy a little bit.
Well, and trying to fight that mentality within yourself and correcting all these habits that you've made over time from just growing up like that is hard enough, let alone trying to convince people around you that that's not the way it should be, maybe. And that's a crazy fight that's just always going to happen.
Well, the combination of time and propaganda just destroys nuance, too. Like, if we go back to discussing, like, how could a country ever, do business with Hitler, let's say, at the height of his reign. That's crazy. We could never do that. That doesn't make any sense. You have to be evil to associate with them. But if you look at like just now, look at the countries that have to deal with Russia because they depend on them for energy, and then Russia gets in this war, and it's like, well, would we say they're evil when that's their only energy source, and without it, their country just dies? Like everybody freezes to death and shit like that. That's the nuance you lose as time goes on, and then with the propaganda, like we were. I mean, more specifically, like 40 or 50 years before our time. But even now, it's like communism's so bad. And, we had a time period where writers were blacklisted because of communism. If you were a communist, you were just evil. And it was like this big propaganda machine. I mean, Hemingway, the FBI was, for the end of his life, were following him around everywhere because he associated with communists. So we were taught that it's so bad and all this stuff, but we never were taught really why. Like even now, if you ask somebody, it's like, well, what's so evil about communism? Well, it never works. But why doesn't it work? Do you know why it doesn't work? Do you know what it actually is? They like to, people like to throw around socialism as like this big boogeyman word. It's like, is it though? Do you actually know what it is? Or again, it's just the way it's done and has been done. And it probably would never work just because of especially now with these big corporations that pretty much rule the world now. But it's just funny that we lose all nuance to these things. So, if you see a country that was in World War II and, this was their position, well, why was it their position? Well, they were evil or they were the good guys. Probably not. It was probably in the middle. Other than Germany, Japan, and maybe Italy, I wouldn't say anyone was a good guy or a bad guy necessarily. Like in World War II, it just doesn't. It was too nuanced for that because there was just a lot going on. And you get countries like the UK, like England. Oh yeah, they were the good guys because they were attacked. But how about all the countries they've taken over for how many hundreds of years? The colonialism and the imperialism. Like, is that not evil? Well, like the U.S. has done the same thing to the Middle East. Would you not consider that evil? We're American citizens, so we think we're the good guys, but the rest of the world now is like, not so much actually. And it's like, that's kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Caleb, what character do you feel like you most emanate with right now after saying all that?
Karl Marx. No. I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm one of the pigs. I am like a general rebel rouser though. I do like, at work, I just, if something's really stupid, I'll just be, hey, that's really stupid. How can I get this person overthrown? But I don't want to be the guy that's ruling everything. I don't want to be in charge of people. I don't like power. I don't think wanting power over someone else, I think, is a very bizarre trait. And I couldn't imagine wanting to do that. Just be like, I'm the guy, you do what I say. But some people really, really enjoy that. It's weird.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us right now are kind of in that old major seat where we see how the future can be better. We know what should be done, but we know it's not going to be done in our lifetime.
Maybe AI will do it. I don't know. I don't think humans are capable of getting together and doing anything.
Yeah.
Unless there was a giant catastrophe that wiped out a huge portion of mankind and the remainders were able to rebuild. But even then, it wouldn't take very long for the population to get big enough where people were just like, man, let's be stupid and do dumb shit.
That's funny because we kind of did just have a giant catastrophe, but it just wasn't big enough.
No, it's never big enough.
You were talking about how people don't really understand communism or socialism or if it's evil or why. And I gotta be honest, like I've always had trouble with all the government stuff, all the that kind of stuff growing up. I've never fully understood any of this shit. Like I know what communism is, and isn't socialism almost kind of like the same, like a synonym for communism?
I forget the main difference, but I think communism is more of, let's say the government will tell you what your job is. And socialism, I think, is just like, hey, we all do stuff that's gonna, be the benefit of everyone. So communism is in this book as the pigs are, here's your job. You can work this many hours. And it starts off more like socialism because it's like, hey, you're good at this, so we'll let you, boxer, you're good at moving heavy shit. We'll let you move heavy shit. Makes sense. If you're a good painter, why don't you just be a painter? But in communist Russia, it's not like, oh, you're a good painter, we'll just let you be a painter. No, you still kind of got to work in the shitty factory with everyone else. So everybody just kind of gets the the shit job, and you're all equal, but it all sucks. Like socialism's supposed to be better. I don't know any country that actually enacted true socialism that I know of. If anything, I would say socialism is more just like what we implement in the US. Like we pay tax money, so we have a police force and fire department. Like, that's kind of socialism. It's supposed to build our roads and stuff like that, public education, but we don't do it very well.
So it seems like capital or communism is state owned, whereas socialism is community owned. But I think it boils down to the difference between production and consumption and how those things are divided.
So in communism, the state would determine production and consumption, and in socialism, the people would. But that never works out because it always turns into communism.
Think of like communal living versus, government housing or something. Like that would be the main difference. So if you me, you, and Riley bought a farm, and we all do our part. We have our families there, and everyone just kind of lives for, hey, I grew tomatoes and you grew corn. We'll trade, and that'd be more socialism. But if Riley was in charge of the farm and me and you just worked on it, and he's like, all right, you could give him that many tomatoes, and he'll give you that many corn in return, that would be communism.
Okay.
But I think it's really hard because if you have someone in charge, it's hard to give them the same amount of everything and follow that direction. Like how do you not just go through leaders whenever there's no incentive to have that much responsibility?
Well, that's like the downfall of a lot of unions is the equality portion. So everyone gets paid equally, but then that means the guy who doesn't do dick and is, sleeping in the corner gets paid as the guy who's like the boxer who does all the work, So that's not fair. So when you have this kind of setup where it's like everyone's equal, nobody's actually equal. It doesn't make sense. Like you can't have someone who, is 5 foot tall and super unathletic and they want to play in the NBA. So we just give them a spot. Like that's not equality. That's not fair. It might not be fair that that's what they're given in life, but that's, they could maybe find what they're good at and pursue that. But when a lot of people talk about like socialism and communism, they want everyone to be equal. We're all the exact same. And humans aren't the exact same. Animals aren't the exact same. It doesn't work that way. I think a better society would be one where, like say in schools, instead of we all learn the exact same bullshit through 13 years of school, we instead focus on like after maybe elementary school when you learn your math and all that stuff, everyone gets the basics, but then it's like, hey, you're really good at like structuring things and maybe you'd be good to be like an architect or something. Would you like to do that? And you can start taking classes that would be structured toward that. You're good at math, so we'll focus you on math. It's like, why can't we have focused learning instead of these broad spectrum? Oh, everyone fits in the same box. I'm like, no, not everyone does. That's why most people do terrible in school. That's why most of us hated reading in school because they made it super boring because we weren't reading what we would want to read. And just like, there's so many systems that are implemented in other countries already. And it's like, you watch socialism countries, apparently, like the, Norway and stuff. And it's like, oh, they're doing a lot of the things that are actually working, but it's because they're treating people equally as they're all humans, but they're treating them separately in their abilities.
I remember something that you said a long time ago about how I think you were basically like, China's bad and all, but but one thing they do good is that the algorithm for their internet is the opposite of ours.
It's their TikTok. Their TikToks
okay.
Educational, like they get educational TikToks versus the ones we get are just like, dumb mindless shit.
So it's just TikTok they do that?
I'm sure it's other things. It's like,
because it's like, what if anyone remotely cares about the intelligence of our country and we want to bring up intellectual people to run the country increasingly better, why? I mean, obviously the government doesn't care, but there should be an internet algorithm where every time you search anything, the most intellectual, or I mean, I know that's objective, but like the most, I'll just say the same thing just because everyone understands what I'm trying to say anyway. The most intellectual choices come up at the top instead of the most ridiculous or absurd or perverted or sexual options, because that's what always comes up first. And it's
Well, are you ready for the big truth bomb? This is it's gonna be hard to hear, Bryce. The reason you're seeing those isn't because the algorithm is designed to send you stupid shit. The reason you're sending those to you is because you're not searching the educational stuff, because it goes by what you search initially.
I got a counter argument for you.
Oh no. What is it?
Shreya just established our Instagram on the Arcade Bookshop Instagram.
People are just slanging dong all over it because I see it. I know it's on that Instagram.
Yeah, well, you know how I told Riley this. You know how you hit the, I don't know, the search button or whatever. Yeah. I don't actually use it, so I'm explaining the way she explained it. But you hit the search button before you type a letter. All these like stripper people,
gross things, yeah.
Yeah, like all that kind of like dirty stuff. That's just all that populates immediately. And it's
I think it goes by what's mainly trending all the time. As disgusting as that is, that's what's normally trending.
Yeah, well, I mean, even
and then
so,
the algorithm picks that up, yeah.
And there's a reason that stuff is trending. It started somewhere.
Big daddy capitalism at work.
So
that's why all the music sucks now. It's just all gross.
Yeah.
Caleb, you were mentioning about how in public schools there's no, like, they call it equality, but it's not equality. There's a world that exists above the grunt class where people have just enough money to eke into upper class, where they can pay for private schools. There are private schools everywhere that you can have these specialized classes, all kinds of extracurricular activities for your kids, but you have to pay so much money for them. And so,
yeah, that's the classism in effect.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's like you jump from public schools where you're just shit on constantly with garbage, and you're never given attention to develop your skills that you have innately as like an individual. And so as you get older and older, you miss out on opportunities. You don't know what's out there. But that upper class, they can do those things. They can find avenues that work for them. They can go to college and get networking and all these things that just don't exist, that you don't even ever know of.
I learned that from Gilmore Girls. Where he goes to the night school.
Yep.
And I was like, oh man, I wish I would have went to the night school. They're reading cool books. And I'm like, we didn't read that shit. And yeah, a lot of they're more structured, but they actually, a lot of kids actually need structure, which they don't get in public schools. And I deliver to public schools, and let me tell you, it's terrible. Like, just walking through there, the kids are just in single file line, just getting yelled at by the teachers. They're not getting taught anything really. It's just about passing tests, just standardized tests and just passing test. Can you memorize? Yay, you can pass, and then that's all we care about. And if you can't pass, we'll probably eke you on to the next grade anyway, just to get you out of our hair. And you never really learn anything. I learned more in a year of just studying things by myself than I ever did in school, which is really sad. Because I know a lot of people that even when they went to college and stuff, which a lot of people go to college and they don't know why they're going to college. They just know they're supposed to get crazy student debt, get a degree in something that they never use, and end up working like a Walmart or something as a manager. And nothing wrong with that if that's what you would want to do, but most people don't want to do that. I went to school for sports science, but I work at Kohl's. I'm like, well, that fucking sucks. But a lot of people, even when they go to college, spend all this money, even the ones that are actually trying, they don't learn a lot. Like my sister, she went to school for graphic design, and she was like, this is bullshit. I could have learned everything that I got in school from YouTube videos pretty much, but I had to pay this money just to get the degree so I could get the job for the same skills that I probably end up learning on the job anyway, because everyone does their things differently. So it's like outside of like niche, computer class, certain computer programs and stuff, you don't really need to go to school for a lot of things. But this country, and this is a whole nother rant we don't need to go on, but like the government just kind of made it so, like a combination of the government and these big corporations, that you need a degree to get a decent job. And not even a decent job, really, if you look at like the pay, like just a job to get by. And it's like, why? This is something you could just learn on the job and not have to pay anything. It doesn't make sense, but it's just where we're at as a society for some reason.
Yeah, and I think all of that collectively explains in the book why none of the animals know how to do anything about their situation. Like, there's never a point where they go, aha, like, I know why things are bad right now. I know what needs to be changed. It's only Napoleon that is ever pulling the strings and knowing, okay, like, I'm above these guys. I know exactly what to do to make their insides tick and make this happen.
And what sucks is, if the animals got together and rebelled against the pigs to be like, hey, we want to learn stuff. We want to be more involved in the decision-making process. The pigs would create some kind of bullshit scenario where, yeah, we'll teach you this stuff. And then it would be all wrong. It just wouldn't help them and probably make it worse for them, actually.
And just one little detail to bring the education back to, like, directly to the book. Other than just like the vague idea that, like, they don't know any better, you specifically see it every time the commandments change, because the only person who can read is Benjamin. Is it Benjamin?
Yeah, some of the animals can read a few letters.
Yeah,
and then the pigs obviously can read.
There's I forget which character, but one of them gets really good at, like, A, and then he learns B, and then he forgets A or something like that.
That was Boxer.
That was Boxer, yeah.
and then
he can write it with he wrote it in the sand or whatever with his hoof.
Yeah. and then some of them learn, like, some of it, like the first half, and then forget, but yeah, that's a way it directly relates to the book, because they continuously change the commandments and they paint over it, and the only, like, nobody, you don't I guess you don't see most of the animals. Like, there's more animals than the characters in the book, obviously, but most of the animals don't even see it. Some of them notice something's a little bit different, or they'll be like, oh no, it's been this way all along, but they need someone to verify it because they can't read, because there's no education. And also, in terms of education, I wanted to bring this question around. What do you guys think about the fact that this book is primarily assigned to kids in middle school or, like, early high school?
I often wondered if that was deliberate because kids at that age wouldn't understand the allegory, or if that's just done because it has animals in it and it's something they can read easily and follow the general story. Because as a general story, it's very easy, and it's just like, oh, well, that sucks, and that's a bummer ending. But I don't, even with the study guides and everything, I don't think because I read this in middle school, and I didn't take away all this stuff from what I remember. Like, I just remembered the story about the animals rebelling.
Yeah, I think it's a 120-page book. It's really easy to comprehend on a surface level, so it's perfect for that age group. But at the same time, even if you don't know about the wars and all the analogies, you pick up on, oh, these guys are bullies. If you're a bully, you get what you want. And sometimes groups can do something about that. Other times people are just unable to help.
I think for me, if I read this in school, I think even if I read this in college, to be honest, I don't think I would take from it what I did today, because I think if you haven't worked a job for at least a year, like, full time, I think part time you don't really give a shit anyway. I think if you haven't worked a full time job for at least a year or two, you can't take. I don't think you even get it. Like you said, you can get the vague things, like people being bullies and the ones that the people that are wrong. Like, obviously you can pick up on that, obviously, because it's in there. It's blatant. But this book really, it's talking about government, but you also, while you're reading it, you think about your position at work and how unfair work is. And, because the animals are working every day, it's literally, it's a minimized version of government, and that's what jobs are, if you think about it. And I don't think kids get that, because most kids aren't working, especially if you're reading it in middle school. And most kids don't give a shit about government.
No.
So you're definitely not going to pick up on those things. And I don't know that, I feel like, I don't know. I didn't read it in school, but I don't know that it's even worth it to assign it to them if they're not going to get those things, because those are the important things.
Well, it goes in layers too, because you were talking about, part-time job. Like say you're in college and you work part-time, you could maybe understand some, oh yeah, it sucks to have a boss that doesn't do anything and tells you what to do. But then, you have a full-time job, you're like, oh yeah, work life does kind of suck. This isn't fair. But then when you get to the point where your job is your livelihood and you're dependent on yourself to survive, and now you're, because of that, you're dependent on your boss not to fire you. Like you have to have this job. It takes on a whole nother level of just bullshit where it's like, oh man, this really sucks, because now I want to change something at my job, or I want to change my career or whatever, but I can't because, what if I risk my lifestyle now? Like the deeper you are in the hole too, the worse it gets. And that's something like middle schoolers are never going to understand that. It's like, oh yeah, why don't the animals just, tell the pigs to fuck off and kill them, and then they just take over? It's not that simple. Yeah. Because, if you do that and let's say, you tell your boss to fuck off and I quit. Now you don't have a job and now you can't pay your rent. Now you're fucking homeless. Like it just spirals out of control. And kids they just can't understand that. They can't comprehend that because there's, not old enough to live that kind of life yet. Unfortunately. Well, fortunately, I guess, not unfortunately.
I mean, maybe they learn a few things, but
there's undoubtedly lessons in there, regardless of what age you read this, and I will acknowledge that it's a very easy book to read. The language is just very simple, down to earth. They're animals; they're talking simply. All of the exposition is very even. It's a simple thing to read, and it's.
When we read this in school, we watched, I think, a cartoon on it too. It was like a movie that went along with it, and I don't remember either of them very well until I remember
when you were rereading it this time, you were mixing it up with Charlotte's Web.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, Charlotte's Web too. I was like, wait a minute, I don't remember the communism in Charlotte's Web. Was it the spider? Was she hoarding something? I don't know.
Well, you guys got anything else?
Them damn Pokemon need freed. They need like a rebellion. Ash Ketchum's a fuckface.
I feel like there was a part in the first Pokemon movie where they were just all working together to make their own little world, and then Ash shows up and they're just like, damn it.
Little jerk.
Well, I don't know. I was looking at those new games, and I might have to enslave some more Pokemon sometime in the near future. But you know what? They don't even look like real things anymore, so I don't feel that bad about it. And that's why I become a Napoleon.
Did you watch the whole video I sent you on the Mandela effect with video games?
Yeah.
I like the what was the name of it? The something Quill, the made up Pokemon that turned out to be somewhat of a real Pokemon.
Tentaquill.
That was cool.
Yeah. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That's so weird.
They made it on 4chan, or like somebody drew it on 4chan, but then they don't know. It's like because it was in the demo. No one ever saw it. And it's like, well, was this guy involved with the demo? And they never found the guy again. So it was like, God damn it.
Well, what did you guys like better, the game or the book?
I mean, I enjoy the game more, but now I see how the nuances of the book are just unlimited. It's just, you can really tie it into any part of life now, just back and forth. I think that the game is really fun, but it's very surface level. You're going to have fun with it, set it down. The book, you're going to think about off and on for the rest of your life just because you're constantly in that battle.
So what's your choice?
The book.
I have to go book as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was one of the better, not the best read I had this year, but it was definitely in the top 5 of my top reads. And Pokemon, it's fun, but it's kind of repetitive. Like for me, I always thought it was one of those games where I would like zone out a little bit and just, go through fights and dumb shit. And it was like, okay, like I didn't have to focus too much on, but like Animal Farm is like he said, it's something that's going to stick with you for a long time.
Yeah. If you asked me when I was, or if I asked me when I was like 15, I'd probably say the game, because that was closer to, it was closer to when it came out originally. It was still really fun and new. And it's still a really good game if you give it if you can actually, like, as an adult, sit down and let it unfold again if you have the patience for it. I would say the book as well as an adult, just for all the reasons you guys said. I was surprised. I sort of, when I first started it, I sort of expected it to be like very, very, very simple because of the way it read and for how short it was. But by the end, even the last page, I was like, oh my God, this is the best. I mean, you see the animals standing up like humans, wearing human clothes, playing poker, and it makes you think of that painting of the dogs at the poker table.
and some kudos to Orwell, because he was able to create what it sounds like a ridiculous scenario of these animals, these sentient animals that can take over a farm, and the pigs end up walking and stuff. But he told it in a way that it seemed like, yeah, that's real. That checks out. They could do that. They talk.
Yeah, and then the last scene, it's like suddenly like a Dali painting or something, like because you end up picturing the pigs turning into humans. Like, I don't know, it's something like that. Anyway, it was just very ridiculous. I don't know. I literally pictured them turning into like human faces. But yeah, I would say the book. I am curious about, because they did come out with like new versions of Ruby and Sapphire for, I don't know if it's for Switch or...
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah. I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
If I got my hands on that, I might play that again. I don't know.
I do think it's funny, also, just a small side note, that there are Pokemon Safari games where you don't catch the Pokemon, you just take pictures of them so respectfully.
Oh, yeah. Pokemon Snap and...
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, like you're just walking through the forest like, hey, what's up?
Do you think Pokemon taught a generation of kids to mistreat animals? Or do you think it taught them kinship with animals? Because, I mean, yeah, you fight the Pokemon, but, everyone's like, oh, Pikachu, that's my friend. Like, so, what do you think is the situation there?
I think Michael Vick played Pokemon.
Oh, damn. Yeah, he would.
Too soon.
I think as a kid, I don't know if that's a serious question, but I think as a kid, at least for me, you do see more like the cuddly nature of it. It's when you still have an innocent mind. I don't know. You kind of forget that, like, what's actually happening. I think, like, I saw them for being cute or cool looking, and then just getting the job done. You're not really thinking about how because nobody actually dies or anything.
Yeah.
They KO. They get knocked out, which is still kind of violent, but.
So just mad brain damage.
Yeah.
Great.
And they go to the doctor all the time.
They're fine.
What a lovely life.
Hey, but no doctor bill. Or was there a doctor bill? Did you have to pay for that?
I don't think so.
Free healthcare?
They had universal healthcare in Pokemon?
Okay, this is communist.
Socialism. That's socialism. Communism, I don't know if I feel like communism would have really shitty healthcare. It might be free for everybody. It may be terrible. Be some guy in a back alley.
I mean, it was just like a hut where they put you in a machine for 30 seconds.
Okay, it might be communism then.
Did you have to pay for that? I don't think you did. I don't remember.
Well, it was a Japanese game, so he probably didn't make you pay. He probably didn't even understand the whole idea of having to pay for healthcare.
It's the one thing I feel bad about on the Pokemon episode, because I didn't play it, but I mean I don't feel bad because I've played it so many times, but there are like key things I don't remember that I'd have to like go back and actually play it or to remember. Like I don't remember how money worked. I know you had to buy things, but I don't know. There's a variety of details that I know we glossed over, but at the same time, I know everyone's played that stuff, and it's like, you guys know what we're talking about. When we're talking about the story, that's all.
I mean, we kind of talked about the story for 5 minutes.
Because it's not that big.
Wasn't much of a story.
I know. It's a one-time thing. And I think everyone enjoyed it regardless. Because we have imaginations, and I think it was relevant anyway. Everybody good? Are we solid on this?
So good.
Animal Farm, read it. Pokemon, play it.
Fun time. Stay tuned for the next couple of episodes of Arcade Bookshop, airing every other Monday. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, share it with your friends if it's their thing. And leave us some comments and reviews and stuff. Tell everyone how you like it, even if it sucks. We just want you to be honest. It's good to be honest. But we want you to say good stuff too, because that gets us going. We can keep talking to you. We can keep having fun with each other. Be sure to follow and watch for us on Instagram at arcade_bookshop. You can look for our playing and reading schedule in the show notes or our Instagram, so you can play and read along. If you have any game and book recommendations, you can message us on Instagram or shoot us a message at arcadebookshop@gmail.com. Love to hear your recommendations. Sometimes it's really hard to pair these things up. Let's not forget Caleb and his life outside of this podcast.
If you want to listen to my other podcast where we talk about writing and books, that is the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast, found on every platform. You could follow us at DPW Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, the platform formerly known as Twitter, and YouTube. And you can follow me at calebjamesk.com where I post stuff sometimes.
Do you have like a business page, Riley, or anything like that? Or anything you want to share?
No, I'm in the shadows.
But you do some stuff on the side, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to advertise?
No.
Okay. Do you have any ventures coming up that you'd like to announce, or is it still quiet?
No. We're actually planning some big things in the future. My coffee company, Ghost Coffee Collab. We are based in Pittsburgh. We are 5 friends who have been doing coffee for way too long. We are opening a cafe in collaboration with Trace Brewing. We are going to be located in Uptown, doing beer and coffee and other cool things for your friends and you to come and do with us, hopefully at the end of October.
Uptown Pittsburgh.
Yep.
That sounds fun.
It's only 2 blocks from PPG Arena.
So if you Pittsburghers get on out in a few months and check them out, and if you're not from here, take a trip down. You can meet Riley, and you can look us up. Anyway, thanks so much for listening to Arcade Bookshop. Please do yourself a favor and stick a controller in one hand and your book in the other.